Hello, my name is Rojo, and today I'm going to be looking at SK Gaming versus Schalke 4 from week 5 of the LEC. Uh, Going back in time, the reason I'm doing this is because I want to do a no pause review of a matchup that is going to be happening in in the LEC playoffs. So, without further ado, and because I have nothing else to say, let's look at the drafts. Obviously, I'm covering Syndra, I'm covering Ezreal, but okay, you know what's gonna bother me. I'll fix it in a second when we get into the game. Okay, so looking at just the drafts here, uh, Kennen, strong, team fight ultimate, mid game focused, magic damage dealing. And then you have, of course, the Orianna is another magic damage dealer. And then you have physical damage. Bard could potentially do magic damage, but it's negligible in a professional game. So what we see here is a pretty heavy team fight oriented composition. For the most part, you have two champions that are wanting to be played into. One champion that's going to try to flank and push people into his team. And then, I guess, a defensive choice. And then maybe another. Bard can be used offensively by using the Tempered Fate onto targets, locking them down. And then allowing Trundle and his Lagoon squad to come in onto that target or those targets and affect that and affect the effectively pick someone off or start a fight with an advantage. But Bard is also defensively oriented. He can protect against people trying to walk into his carries that are more threatening, that might potentially take them out before they're actually able to do anything. Um, so we look at this and we see melee, pretty long range, fairly short range, about the same as Aphelios, and then a fairly short range. This is Orianna's by far the longest range on this team, with a bunch of relatively mid-range champions and a melee champion. There isn't really a super great ball delivery, I guess, system. Again, you could have the actually kind of covering the you could have the flank with the Kennen. But the question is, do you really want to have to do that with Kennen? Especially when you consider how these two really actually want to fight, very front to back. Kennen can play front to back. It's just not the way that he wants to play. It's something that he can do, just like how Trundle can play front to back. But if he's playing front to back, he's probably not actually doing anything that's relevant. You look at the opposing composition and Jace, physical damage, physical mix, negligible magic mostly, and magic damage. So both these compositions have a good mix of damage. They have pretty good one item and two item wake ups. I feel like they're both fairly mid game oriented with some carry potential on the later end with the Aphelios and with the Ezreal. This, by the way, is the time before before Aphelios kind of lost his prominence across the board in every region, basically. There are a few issues that I have with Schalke's composition. I'm not entirely sure what Olaf is supposed to do. I'm not, I guess, run in and then have no one actually be able to reach the targets he's attacking. um, because Jace and Ezreal have two completely different mindsets. Syndra is like long range potential pick potential, potentially pick potentially capable of picking people. But that's very unlikely given the way that Aphelios is going to play, given the way that Orianna is going to play. Her most likely target is Kennen and Trundle. Obviously, I think that what's happening here is that these two were picked against each other. The Olaf and the Trundle were picked against each other. It was the meta a couple weeks ago. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing because they don't really make sense in their compositions. I guess you could argue that Trundle at least provides some potentially defensive qualities, actually scales somewhat better than Olaf. I was going to say decently, but it's really just better than his opponent. Can farm just as effectively, if only slightly slower than Olaf. Obviously, Olaf is one of the fastest clearers in the game. Here's my issue. Okay. So Kennen is going to be sad after a certain point, where Orianna and Aphelios are like, "Yay, we can fight now." Um, Jace and Olaf are going to be rather sad when Ezreal's like, "Oh, it's time," unless he goes the Triforce build, um, which I suppose is probably going to be his choice because that's you're going to want to spike on those. You're going to want to spike as early as possible, and have the highest amount of damage you can deal as early as possible as Ezreal. Especially because the Iceborne has pretty low effectiveness. You're not going to be hitting. You're not going to be getting hit with Trundle. You shouldn't be getting hit with Aphelios's shots. You know, if Ezreal's getting hit with Aphelios, there's something entire. There's a whole bunch of problems going on, especially given everything else, every other target. Because if Aphelios is hitting Ezreal, Ezreal's dead. Ezreal is not just dead. He's the only one alive left. Because Ezreal should be hard outranging Aphelios and avoiding everything he can do using his range advantage. So the value of the Iceborne is pretty low. So that on top of the fact that he wants to spike with a lot of good amount of damage with the Olaf, he wants to do a lot of damage with Jace. Seems like the choice is pretty clear. He's going to be going Triforce this game. They have somewhat hard CC and poking, and then Olaf doesn't really have a purpose, especially after like 15 minutes. I guess 20. I don't want to be too harsh on the pick. Obviously, I think it. By the time you get second Rift Herald is when you're like, all right, now we just have basically an anchor on our team that we have to drag through the finish line. Whereas at least Kennen has the ability to flank, covering my arrow, flank around and maybe push the opposing team into his team. There's already clear reasons why the Schalke team would not like that. Olaf would like, I guess, to be pushed in to his the opposing team, but he's going to be taking a lot of damage before he gets to do anything anyway. I would imagine that what should be happening in these games is Olaf gets to play pretty freely. His obvious targets are going to be the bottom lane because of the setup from the Nautilus, because of generally how squishy these two targets are. Not the easiest thing to gank, but it's probably his best bet. Probably shouldn't ever be able to get an Orianna, but it's possible, I guess, depending on how Orianna plays. If she plays too forward, Kennen is probably not a solid option. There's actually I would imagine Olaf wants to path towards the bottom lane and work against the Aphelios. There is a world where he can affect the mid and top laners, but I think that world is where they make pretty horrendous mistakes. On the other side, Syndra isn't super vulnerable to Trundle. I guess it depends on how she is positioned in the lane, obviously. Jace shouldn't have any problems with him, then these two shouldn't have any problems with him. So Trundle's place is probably going to end up being, he's going to look towards the 2v2 mid, but I feel like the 2v2 mid is won by Schalke 4. If you give up, let's assume that Olaf somehow gets both the dragons and first Rift Herald. First 2 dragons and then Rift Herald. From that point, I can see Schalke being able to accelerate the game enough that because of they might be able to accelerate the game enough. But it's the third dragon is going to be huge, actually. That third dragon is going to be the big decider in this game. Because on third dragon, pretty much every single champion is going to have items that they are like, all right, we can fight now. And the big mystery is going to be, can the Ezreal get Muramana by that time? Or have the Muramana finished by that time? Probably, because he gets tiered fairly early. And if it's early enough, if the dragon is taken early enough, we're looking at what, 23 minutes? I actually have no, I genuinely have not seen this game, so I have no idea when the dragons get taken or spawn. But if we assume like a 23-minute third dragon, which I think might be considered late even, especially against Olaf and Trundle, or especially considering Olaf and Trundle, who are very, very quickly able to take those dragons alone. And don't necessarily need not just alone, but very quickly and very early on in the game. So I think what Schalke really want to see happen is Olaf is able to get the first 2 dragons as early as possible, focusing on getting them, potentially giving up third dragon, and fighting for their soul point dragon once Ezreal has his Muramana. If the third dragon spawned, Ezreal has his Muramana, I think that they are sitting pretty and they're willing to take the fight, and I think that they can actually run away with the game from that point. On the flip side, if Schalke decide to flip some random fight at another point or at an earlier point, I can see it being pretty heavy SK favorite. Alternatively, none of that might happen, and to find out. So we're gonna go at 1.5 speed, no pausing, starting.
Had to ban away from him.
Oh god, it's so loud.
With the game. And then you have a very safe bot lane with an engage coming from the support. So
oh jeez, oh gosh, why was it 100%? All right.
Of course, you have a huge amount of wombo combo, but no solid front line from SK. So things like
yes,
that are going to be a lot harder. Talk more about
that
draft
seems
as we
like
get into
mini
the
map
game.
size.
This is, of course, our first game, update 2, week 5, SK versus Schalke. And once again, we make
I was wrong. Oh god, my port, it's too big.
Neither team going for an early level 1 here, Vedius. But I do want to come back to sort of the discussion on SK's composition because you talked a lot
Okay,
about
so
how
they do a
Schalke
5-point
have
start.
strong 2v2 mid jungle, strong top lane, safe bot lane. SK have slightly more of a
Nothing.
team fight, but how can they mitigate some of the early pressure that Schalke could put?
I
No.
think it's really difficult.
Wacky
I
invades.
think that outside of bot lane, and even I think bot lane's a little debatable too. I think that Schalke kind of have winning lanes across the board and a very strong early game.
You're gonna.
ability.
Okay.
Depending on
There
what
was
time they show up and
a
what position,
ward
could be very devastating. So I'm really interesting
placed
what
right
early jungle
here.
pathing looks like, because for SK, like,
Pretty
they're definitely
standard
looking at these team fights, and I think Drake's a
defensive
really
ward
important for them.
from the red side
So
team.
being able to gain priority
Looks like
around
they're
bot
gonna
maybe
try to
or
go for the
take
red
those Drake is
and try to
something
split the
SK
map.
It's always very dangerous. I really like this delayed invade coming out from Schalke, trying to utilize the strength of the Olaf to put Trick behind.
Oh, and Trick is starting solo on the red buff. This is actually really, really bad for Trick.
Priority rather. So this gives Neon and Dreams, while they will be a little bit late to lane, Crown Shot Unlimit don't have a jungler now in the bot side of the map. All those camps are going to be taken away. They have to play a lot more defensive.
They're not even late. They don't. They red side doesn't miss anything. This is actually super, super beneficial. And what is Gilly's doing?
In the same time, he's also in a position where he's going to be very
Oh, and he prevents the map split. That's really, really unfortunate. That's really unfortunate for Trick. He's basically ruined at this point. At least for the early levels, he's going to be down in experience and camps, which means he's likely going to be down in tempo if he wants to maybe delay his backs until he can afford certain items before his first back. Or he could just coin flip. He's just gonna flip a... Yep. Alright, cool. Let's see. Does he just waste his time? Dreams actually missed the thing, gets a flash. Not the worst. But he's just gonna get double scuttled. So this is the most flip thing I've ever seen. Just like not necessary at all.
So this is, I think this is really interesting because Gilius not only is going to get 3 buffs, he's going to get double scuttles here, and he also...
And he keeps pushing the wave, so it's automatically going in, he's giving his mid laner priority every time he does that. But Trick is able to go to the camp, so he is able to trade some camps back. Not the absolute worst.
You can see Dreams positioning in a way like, okay, I see where Trick is, I know what's happening, we should be good, and we should see Neon.
It's not the absolute worst. It is a double scuttle, but okay.
Yeah, so that was a bit weird.
I
wasn't expecting Limit to just actually make that play.
That was a
work out.
very interesting
That's gonna force him back
play.
They do get dives, and
He's
they
just
lose a lot
dead.
now. Dreams
I
in
don't-
trouble.
Never mind. He kind of blocked himself off with that.
Underneath this tower, but this is CS being lost and possibly a plate for SK.
Yeah, this play ends up much worse for Schalke than it should
This
have, all
is
because Limit was able to
very,
lock
very...
landing
This
on
just
Neon.
turned...
This forces him back when he should have been able to catch this wave. If he was healthy enough to not get dived, they were relatively safe. Dreams hook just missing there. Not what we usually see from a Nautilus hook. Usually when that thing goes out, it hits
Okay.
everyone for a 1
So Gilius, I mean, you can see here, Gilius is going as early as possible to the dragon. He's literally on spawn. He's walking right to it. This flows with what I thought was going to end up happening. Makes sense. And now, sure, it's not the kind of like, I'm going to choke. He still hasn't even cleared that, by the way. So this is just going to continue being countered until the Bard clears it, which is actually really bad for Trick. And in that one instance, it actually ended up being beneficial to the Olaf, or sorry, to Trick, because Olaf would have actually just taken the camp freely. And I mean, he's already got a basically 3-camp lead, which is very, very massive at this stage of the game. He actually he went for the boots, which isn't stats at all. Doesn't actually help him do anything except cross the map faster, which is something, but that's more like I'm gonna try to gank places, then I'm gonna be able to secure and outduel the Trundle if I see him. He's still going to be, he still has the advantage because he's gonna back. Now he's still ahead in tempo. He's gonna now have the extra stats that he was missing previously, and he's gonna just walk over to the camps that he was looking for. And as you can see, Trundle doesn't really have a good place to go. This isn't an option for him because, I mean, not only are they difficult to get anyway, this is really, Nautilus makes things difficult to dive. The Jace isn't really vulnerable to Trundle, and the Syndra is probably the most vulnerable, as I said. that, but it's still also not very vulnerable because Trundle is a melee range champion that just gets tossed away by Syndra. I didn't really talk about the Jace Kennen matchup. It's going pretty well for the Jace. I suppose that's makes sense.
Thank you, observers. Thank you.
That's for people whose top of their screen is covered
The
up.
point that I was trying to get to was I think a Cloud Soul could be really valuable for a team like SK, where you do kind of have to run at your opponents, and things when you're looking at Kennen flanks, Trundle Pillar, to be able to get in range, having that additional movement speed can be extremely valuable. So that's one potential soul they can take advantage of, but we'll get to see which one that will be.
It's not going to be
Lights.
Inferno, so either we're gonna have an ocean, it's gonna
Alright,
be
so SK are actually, they have transferred their entire team over. And likewise, in fact, Schalke have also transferred a lot of their team over. This is currently benefiting the... it was currently benefiting SK, but then they kind of got a little greedy for the Herald. They end up losing the Herald, and they end up trading 1-for-1. The two top laners are going to have to back. Ottawamne just dies because he's inside of the Kennen ultimate. Kennen creates a little situation here. That's incredible. No one even had smite, so they both use their smites on enemy champions. I'm actually not entirely sure about that, but it wouldn't make any sense for anyone else to do anything else, or for them to have used the smite on anything else before doing the Herald. So currently things are going very smoothly for Olaf. I think Olaf is doing exactly what he wants to be doing right now. He doesn't really need to affect the lanes too much. What he wants to do is gain an advantage objective-wise so that he can create win conditions for his team that accelerates his team and allows his team, I said his team like 4 times, to close out the game faster without having to play into Aphelios, who is a hyper carry in the late game. Obviously, Ezreal is a very, very strong late game carry, but when you have champions like Jace, who does fall off quite a bit, and the Olaf, who falls off even harder, and then Nautilus, who doesn't really gain too much effectiveness across the game, and you're against Orianna and Phelios, you want to close out the game as early as possible. Because, sure, Syndra and Ezreal can play the game against Aphelios and Orianna, but the rest of their team can't. And also, Kennen is a factor that is exacerbating the issue. Because your team also cannot play into Kennen.
It will be the Ocean Soul, and that's going to be extremely valuable on a comp like Schalke. We already saw Dreamer Shadow and his Olaf when he got that Ocean Soul. That was scary. Now Amadaga is looking for Trick, takes half his health.
Early unleash power, but the subjugate goes down, and Trick will heal up quite a bit. The Gilius is going to be able to just secure this red buff, and Schalke looking in a pretty okay position.
That is a huge disparity. This is exactly what you want to see from the Olaf. He's doing pretty well. I think that this is a little... This is fine, actually. You want to get the plates, and you can get... Was it 3 plates right there for that charge? It's not... I don't think it's possible to claim the whole tower in the next 30 seconds, but it's definitely a lot of value. And I think that that's really what you're trying to do if you're Schalke. You're trying to gain as much value as early as possible to get to where you want to be.
Assuming that they will ramp up as the rest of the split goes on, but that's exactly why you want to try and secure these wins as Schalke, because of how important they could be when it comes to those things like head-to-head records.
Oh, actually, Jace is going the Muramana build, so in fact that does scale. My thinking was based around the lethality build, which I guess doesn't actually make sense when you really think about it. So I think this is smart. I just had a certain build in mind that I should have known was obviously suboptimal. Or I guess I considered it suboptimal, but I didn't really think it was gonna. Oh, okay.
do not think that was his plan. Medic.
He might have misclicked there. So with the Mermana build, you actually do scale pretty decently as Jace, or at least better than the lethality. Obviously, lethality is a problem when you consider that Death's Dance is going to be built, Zonia's is going to be built, Trundle gains an excessive amount of armor, Zonia's is going to be built as part of the Kennen build. Bard, I guess, doesn't really matter, but he actually does have a chain vest in his inventory already, so this is much more. This is going to be a lot more damage than the lethality build overall over the course of the game. Maybe early on you could say that the lethality build is maybe doing more damage, but I don't know the exact math in this situation. Okay, so third dragon is what I said was going to be the big contest, and my big questions are asking what is exactly happening, and Schalke didn't give up the third dragon. So this is the dragon that I said, okay, Schalke need to give it up if they do not have the necessary items. They don't even have a completed anything on Ezreal. This is terrible decision making. You know for a fact that Aphelios has the Infinity Edge. You know for a fact that the Kennen is on his Proto Belt, which makes him very, 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 very strong. What they should be looking for is looking for a trade, and I think that the Herald was available, as that's just great. I believe the Herald was available as a potential objective at this time. Yeah, it was. So they could have just said, all right, we can't contest, we'll cross over for the Herald. I think that was the better choice. So far this is actually falling in line with what I was thinking. The next dragon, maybe we're going to be seeing the Mermana completed, and then the Triforce, hopefully. Okay, if they're covering for this push, I think this is fine. For the most part, it's not really using resources. This is an interesting use of the Herald. I think that he screwed up, actually. I think. I can't imagine that that is the actual use. I think he wanted to use the Sweeper. But he forgot he was holding the Herald, and so now it is spawned and just killed by Syndra, so that's just gone now. Could have been great here. That tower would be dead, actually. Oh, and then what happened? Oh! Never mind, he's a genius. Okay. So what I'm seeing here is that we are trying to aggress into situations where we're not really invited to the party. Okay, what happened? Adwamne is like teasing back here. Okay, the Shockwave and Moonlit Vigil, or Moonlight Vigil, really ruined Schalke 4. And this is the issue, right? This is only going to be more and more problematic as the game goes on. Which is why Schalke wanted to end the game as quickly as they can. And now they're in a pretty bad spot because they've given so much gold over to Schalke. He did go the Iceborne. Almighty circle, as you can see with this beautiful. I don't know if I agree with that. When you look at the Trundle, who can actually steal your stats, the main damage dealers are magic. You should never be getting hit with the Aphelios. Obviously, I understand the idea. You want to go as tanky as possible, but I don't know how much utility the slow field is giving you for a team that doesn't really care about the slow field. At least from what I can tell. Maybe it really does, and it's down to their practice that they require the slow field. This is difficult now because they don't really have an in, and they just lose dragon. So now this is becoming problematic. If the game was tighter, this situation doesn't need to happen. Also, they were doing that thing that I don't like, where you go to an objective that you're not actually able to contest, and you dance around, and you're like, you're gonna just leave and give it to us, and then they don't leave and give it to you, so then you're just sitting there like, we'll go to mid. So you have to like scramble instead of actually actively doing something.
movements, but again, Schalke still kind of coming out ahead here as they push in midway.
Basically, you're just acting as
Tier 1 tower. And,
living wards that can move around.
We have just seen that Leon is complete for Zazi. Genex has his second item as well.
It doesn't really pressure the opposing team to finish or do anything with the dragon. It's just they just finish the dragon, regardless of whether Schalke are there or not. Schalke did end up getting the mid tower though from that dragon, so it's not the end of the world. And it is difficult, I think, from this point as Schalke. The Olaf has become his dead weight mode. The mana item hasn't been completed on Jace, but we're getting there. He is going the lethality. He's getting Yomu's. I don't know how much more lethality he gets in the Mirror Mana build. I think he actually goes just Mirror Mana and then mostly lethality, if I remember correctly. But the Mirror Mana does provide just that little bit of extra oomph further in the game that he wouldn't have otherwise. And on squishy targets, he just starts destroying. The issue, of course, being that squishy targets don't really exist when you're building Death Dance or Zonias, just because you can. Also, the Andrews is already picked up by the Oriana, so she's even tankier than just with the Zonias. Spellbinder on the Syndra is interesting because I don't necessarily know how she's planning on using that.
Right now, 25 minutes in. SK only with 1,000 gold lead. I will state, it's quite close still in terms of just pure gold, but SK's composition seems so much more powerful right now.
I mean, currently, I guess the best target for Dreams just walked into them. That's unfortunate. Face checking them is kind of difficult. Abbedagge is just dead. He's not dead. He is dead. Oh, that shockwave is actually really good. And now they don't really have an in. I don't know where Ezreal's been this whole time. And then he just gets jumped on. No one can really protect him because the Cinder's gone. And there's no actual threat against SK, so they just keep walking. I don't think they get the Baron, but wait, what is Otawama doing? I guess he. Oh, I thought he was gonna get the Kennen kill. What is happening right now? I guess the game is just like they're tired of playing the game. They just decided to give up playing. These are two playoff teams, by the way. Although I'm aware of the miracle run by Schalke. It's a little frightening when this is a playoff series that's happening. And I would imagine that Schalke have gotten appreciably better. I haven't paid enough attention to say that they have or not. Yeah, this whole sequence started because Dreams kind of just walked into them, into an area that he probably shouldn't be walking into them, and then this fight just keeps happening, and happening, and just doesn't stop. And then they keep walking back in, and then they walk out, and they walk back in, they walk back out. There's no such thing as cutting our losses, apparently. I guess they took it as a skill test. Not entirely sure. So even though Olaf has done his job, he's actually very ahead of the Trundle. He doesn't provide as much value as a Trundle. I don't know if this Knight's Vow is actually that great, to be honest, but the Trundle is providing shredding. He is providing some extra CC. The Spellbinder Syndra couldn't finish anyone off. Then they're both killed fairly easily because they are fairly behind. And also SK were pretty much 5 coming into this, whereas Schalke were just like 3 people.
SK just trying to act as distraction, and somehow, in the last couple of minutes, Vedius, SK have got like 11 kills, and no one's died. Like, these fights have been absolutely absurd, and SK continue to survive. I mean, I think a large part of it is just the comps. It's very difficult for Schalke to really commit against the comp of SK when they have so many kiting tools, they have so many ways to just disrupt your ability to actually close that gap. And also, SK,
as Vedius is saying, they do have a lot of ways of closing the gap and disrupting.
turned it in their favor.
Um,
So SK now
and at this
have
point,
reset
I
the
mean,
test and the Steam Burn.
SK do not get
No Cavalier
weaker,
towers have gone down yet.
really.
It's actually quite uncharacteristic for this point.
You could argue that
Maybe
Kennen
might be a
doesn't
bit more open,
get
but
much
we've seen some
stronger,
crazy
so he's kind of
fights happen that haven't
plateaued.
really led to many objective gains. The game has been dragged out a little bit longer.
The
but
Trundle
just resulted in
is
SK
also
strong
pretty much
strong
plateaued, and his build is
strong
also
So the expectation all the way back in
with
Big Command
the
that SK had the strongest
Knight's
team fight
Vow,
position, and now the game is all
obviously
about
very
sort of
defensive. He's not really
before
providing
that
a
next
legitimate
bracket.
threat to anyone.
The screen here, Vedius. So
Um,
up in a minute 30 seconds.
He's there just to
But
tank
so
someone
quickly
and
would show us exactly how you can tell that
shred
information.
away someone's resistances,
Thank you, Mr. Circle.
Bless the circle.
Yep.
Oh, big circle came down on top of Doggy, but he sidesteps that one.
and provide extra security. I suppose this Knight's Vow is attached to the Aphelios. It has to be.
And they are grouped up. Zazi as on the back of this, as they look at
might get a
Trick has been
kill.
caught off. Yeah,
Okay.
wondering where Genex was. He's
Frick.
in the middle
Kind
of
of
the waves, but,
out of position there.
Potential from Dreams just too strong there.
I think the Trick honestly just over his stats. He got a little too close, ends up getting punished for it.
As Betty's saying, he just got a little too close to the sun.
Because while SK do get
Um,
power, they're just gonna have to reset
Yeah,
because
this
Trick
game I don't think gets
talk
any
without him means that it has
easier,
0-9.
even in a neutral position. For Schalke, the lack of dragons makes this game very difficult.
Yeah, also, Schalke don't own
Uh,
medic, so unfortunately, even if
when
they
you
wanna try and
want
get Drake, they have
to
a map that they have very little information on. You can see Dreams trying to reclaim
be
some
winning the
information
game,
as
you're
Dreams are
sitting here
highlighted
going,
to
okay,
the
how do
top
we
right now for Schalke.
end? What are our win conditions? And Ocean Drake would have been in win condition.
It's full of terrors.
I guess they could have
And
also
SK right now
steamrolled
looking to feed
through an
the
advantage
defense of Schalke.
after third dragon if they could have gotten a good fight. But because they took the dragons as early as possible, they
Yes, correct. I'm just hoping now that Trick,
this might have been
you know,
like an attitude issue or like a not an attitude issue. they're not playing. They're not like whining or anything, but this might be a mentality issue where, okay, we have the first two dragons. Obviously, we have to contest the third one so that we can put ourselves in the soul point. When reality is maybe the best choice is to just give third dragon, wait for your items, and then contest.
I think Dreams
And hope that you've accelerated yourself enough that you can beat out what SK are doing. Otherwise, you basically just say the comp is unplayable and you go next. And if that's the case, then, I mean, that's just another issue entirely.
It's been a bit chaotic, which has been fun to watch, but I was kind of hoping for a little bit more from Schalke. I think they had a lot of tools to be very proactive in the early game, and they had a lot of winning lanes, but they just...
I don't think it's necessarily unplayable, though.
And I think that playing split push comps in this kind of meta is also just very difficult to do, especially if you can't get those early leads, because of how important the Drake is right now. So,
And as Betty's saying, I mean, the composition is pretty difficult to pull off without early leads. They had a pretty decent position, but I mean, now with Ocean Soul, the game is just a matter of time more than it is anything else. So even though Drake has basically stopped farming, it's like a solid 20 CS, which is like 5 camps over the course of 10 minutes. That's probably unfair. It's probably closer to like 7, but that's still a pretty low amount. Obviously, what's happening is that farm is being funneled to other members. So he's probably not even getting his camps. If anyone else is around the camps, they just get them instead of him. But also, of course, Olaf is a very farm-capable champion. I don't know what this Bard is thinking. What is happening here? Wait, is Gen X just like almost dead? Okay, this is actually not the worst. The problem is now they are outranged, and they are keeping them away. Can't really run them down because that's not what their composition does. Olaf runs them down, but this is a little. This doesn't really run them down. I mean, that doesn't really do that. I guess you could argue with the Iceborne Gauntlets, Ezreal's capable of doing that.
Yes, they do have the Ocean Soul, but SK kind of getting caught with their pants down right now. Is Schalke's finding a lot of pretty solid.
What a
lanes,
weird
which
build.
makes
Wait,
life more difficult.
he went.
So now they're in a position to do the Baron.
Wait, Abadage went
The Ocean Soul should be fine. I was gonna say,
Banshees
you don't have anyone that can tank things up outside of the
with
triangle.
Spellbinder.
Ocean Soul, so it shouldn't really be a problem.
So there was an interesting passage of
And
play
he's
there.
building
So
a
Zazi recalled then teleported to tier 1
Rabadons.
and then Gen X from mid
So-
to the top lane. Was that just for like, oh, okay, well, Gideon has to flash away
He
here.
could have.
He has got stopwatch. Gen X does have stopwatch. Actually looks like Crunchball might be starting up the Baron himself. There's the redemption. Gen X almost dead before it even comes down. He's gonna pull the stopwatch, but now you can see that Baron has been started up.
It's like it's a build of two different minds, right? Because one is like, all right, I'm gonna survive, and then I'm gonna be able to do something in the fight. The other is I'm just gonna one-shot someone. And I I even asked who he's gonna one-shot because you're basically only one-shotting potentially Kennen, maybe a Trundle. And if I swear to God, if Schalke somehow managed to win, I'd be unbelievably impressed with Schalke if they win this game. Okay, I don't think so.
And the rest of Schalke are just going back to the fountain. Gilius will meet them there in about 50 seconds.
So, this does result in a Baron going in favor of SK. Notice that Schalke have very little healing reduction on their side, which means that even if they can find a lot of these good fights, it is very difficult for them to actually kill.
I mean, the healing reduction isn't even that.
Trundle just was not dying.
Sure, the Ocean Soul is a problem, but I mean, that's like the least of their issues.
So SK, they should be able to secure this without a jungler on the side of Schalke. This will be too difficult of a challenge.
I guess healing would be beneficial, but it wouldn't.
Have all the tools to end the game.
They've finally combined to create.
So yeah, the Spellbinder feels like it's
I mean, like, the carries are all
trying to one shot, and then the Banshees is trying to survive a long time. That just seems weird. I feel like you would rather skip the Spellbinder, if anything, and then go to Banshees immediately if you think that you need it, and then go into Void Staff most likely, because I don't know why Rabadon's is going to be the build, because by this point a lot of people have a good amount of MR just naturally. As well, you look at Death Dance, you look at Stoneplate, you look at actually not that much else.
They were just kind of like fighting for the sake of fighting, and obviously it was SK coming out on top of them. It just because it never resulted in any objectives. We're now in this point, so you can see SK quite easily.
I mean, they just have. This is super simple. I mean, they're so ahead. It doesn't even matter what they do with the Baron, but they're actually using it pretty decently. This is the second Baron, obviously. I didn't really touch on the first one, but by that point, I had already considered the game over, to be fair. I feel like I've just been teased for the last minute. Because they've removed my ability to look at the items. I guess they don't really matter at this point, but it's almost like, oh, are they going to fight? They're going to fight, right? They're not going to fight. They leave. Okay. I don't know, they still have Elder.
I mean, they could just go top lane right now. They just push top. Like, they don't need anything else, medic.
Yeah, I mean, Vedius is having the same problems that I'm having. Like, they won. Just end the game. That's not me, by the way. This is me. Stop. This is my thing. Don't do that.
Okay? Like, I was patient at first. Just go top lane now. They could just go top lane and they can end the game.
Crown should agrees with you. Rest of the team, not so much.
Just, yeah.
We don't need to be bot lane.
Okay, they're all going mid for some reason. Should just, I mean, why not just all beeline at the top? There's literally no reason for Kennen to do this. He's not an actual split push threat.
I think they're just being overly scared. That's just my opinion. Because, like, I don't think there's a world in which Oda Wamne...
You should just...
Abadage is the only one that I can see being a different...
I guess the only reason he'd be doing this is so that he can flank, but that's not really relevant at this point.
So, I just think they're being a little too cautious here. They just gotta wait for the super minions to push in because someone has to go answer them.
Especially while he has the flash.
The problem is, like,
A flash cannon ult is more than adequate against any target that's close enough to die to it. Like this, the waves automatically push, so there's no reason for anyone else to be here. And if Kennen's here, they can maybe just force a dive and end the game. So they're playing a little too patiently at this point. And this actually allowing Schalke to damage, and that's, yeah. He just immediately died. That was just not an actual choice that he made.
I mean, sure, but like, I suppose they're getting desperate at this point. I don't know.
Hey, look, Kennen was able to get it. I mean, obviously it worked for SK, right? But I mean, they don't need 3 dragons to beat this composition. They're gonna. Are they gonna? Oh, they're going for 3 barons into 2 elders with Ocean Soul win condition. It's obvious. Everyone knows about the 5 endgame buff objective win condition. I don't. This is not supposed to be this difficult, and it's not even. Not just Oda Wamne. All of Schalke aren't even like playing so that this is happening. SK are just like unwilling to end the game, or do not know how to end the game. They might. Okay.
super minions pushing in the bottom of the
Okay.
lane now as
So now with
respawned. But SK, in a slightly strange position. Janex jumping forward. Look at
okay.
that from the cannon right there. But
So the
Argo
thing that they could have
reaches
done
down
at the
and
towers
finally gets away from the shockwave, but all he's going to do is run back
whole
to his
game,
base, which is in shambles. Flashes away, Trick continues to chase, and here comes Zazi. 1-0 limit will take the kill. He's on a rampage on this part. I believe
you need
he
to
is
kill the
unkilled this game.
inhibitors. Okay, it's fine. We got it.
And they cycled for supports.
We got there. We got there eventually. So important things to know. Schalke have pretty okay early game. Obviously, I think it was like pretty hard carried by the Olaf and the level 1 that he got, which basically put the Trundle just absolutely behind. And then Olaf was able to run around the map as he pleased and was able to get onto objectives pretty much as they spawned. My issue is that Schalke, at least from here, from their 1 and 9 timing, from when they weren't 1 and 9, they need to know what their actual win conditions are, and play to them and be more patient in their plays and be willing to play the map. You know, not every objective needs to be contested. There are occasions where you know for a fact SK are going to go for the third dragon. They have to present themselves at the third dragon before you get there. Otherwise, you just get a third dragon, you're on soul point, and the game becomes very difficult for SK. So because you know where they're going to be, you can play around them and know, okay, we're not at the items we want to be at, and we know that Kennen is at his proto belt. We know that Aphelios just completed his Infinity Edge. They are at a really strong point. We need to slow the game down for a little bit, or if we're not slowing the game down, we need to accelerate it in a way that doesn't put us in danger. SK, on the other hand, were benefactors of a compositional advantage as well as those mistakes that Schalke made, and then mistakes that they individually made over the course of the game, especially during the mid game. I'm not sure what the lanes necessarily looked like. I don't think that there was anything that was super egregious. Maybe if I was really critiquing their laning, I could see something, but I don't think there was anything that was like, holy, just my god. The big thing I think is SK need to know when they can win the game. I don't know if it's a confidence issue, and maybe it's been fixed. This was only when they were 5 and 5. They still had this game, 7 more games to play. I think how time works. So maybe they've fixed everything up and it's all good. But if this is their form walking into the playoff games, which I don't think it is, but if this is the form that they're walking into playoffs with, I mean, it's like hard SK favored. But that was just a quick run through where I missed a lot of things, but that's fine. I've been Rojo. Let me just, okay. Bye.